Good morning.
Good morning.
I spoke to Mark this morning. First, I want to say that since we, our family, has been here in the Triangle family community, that we have felt really, truly welcomed by everybody here.
Can you use the mic?
And,
Yeah,
what, use the mic?
use the mic.
Okay. That, yes, we have felt truly welcomed by the whole community here. Every person has been so gracious, and I'm so happy because I have been able to meet many new brothers and sisters, you know, even being in this movement for almost 50 years, not knowing quite a few of you, you know, so it's been really, really great. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I don't take it lightly to stand as representing someone who's delivered God's word, so I do feel very humbled to be here, and I hope that we can all learn something together today. Okay, so this morning's message, I decided, the title is Our Cherished Hope is for Unity, Divine Principle Course of Action. So, yes, I was, even just this past week, was watching the news, and some headline somewhere said, we're living in the United States of America, but we are not united. So that, I think, is everyone can pretty much agree with that. We remember, though, sitting together with our true Father so many times, and he would say, you know, burst out in song, you know, and we would sing this song all from our hearts, but I don't think we really understood deeply, at least I didn't, what this all entails. So, to begin with, from the New Testament, from St. Peter, this is a very moving and powerful message, I believe, that St. Peter mentioned. He says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. It's quite profound. And if we were able to live according to these words, we could all just go and enjoy our potluck lunch and the sermon would be over, because this is what it's all about. You know, loving yourself, serving each other, creating a loving and warm environment for everyone. This is what St. Peter talked about, Jesus Christ talked about, the whole New Testament, Old Testament, about love, about inheriting God's love. However, we know that even in the very beginning of the early Christian church, there was huge controversy between St. Peter and St. Paul's understanding of who Jesus was and what his message was. St. Peter, probably all of you are aware of this, but he focused on the Jewish people. He was a Jewish person. He was, you know, and not a very educated person, but he lived with Jesus. He saw Jesus' ministry develop. He knew Jesus Christ as a human being. He lived with him. He worked with him. He sweated with him. He sacrificed together with Jesus. And so his whole message was primarily for the Jewish people. And then after Jesus Christ goes to the cross and dies for the sins of all mankind, about, I think it was 30 years or so after that, St. Paul comes on the scene. And he didn't know Jesus at all, but he had a profound spiritual experience where he was, you all know the story, knocked off his horse going to Damascus. He was persecuting Christians, and Jesus Christ appeared to him spiritually. And so because of that incredible salvation, Paul said, you know, I'm a sinner. Salvation by Jesus Christ is for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile. Everyone should be saved. So in the early Christian church, there was already disunity, is what I would like to say. There was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. What do we focus on? Who should be our, you know, who should become the messengers of Jesus Christ? So this controversy. And then we heard just a couple weeks ago when John gave his sermon that in the Divine Principle, it explains very clearly that Christianity has not been able to answer the moral questions of today, the political questions of today, the social questions of today. And so because of that, then we have this incredible split between the democratic world and the communist world, and they're in conflict. And we see that very much today, in today's society, all over the world. There is conflict and confusion. So how does our true Father address this? Well, he came, as we know, as the firefighter and the doctor. And he came in the early 70s, or actually in the 60s was his first visit. But in Lincoln Center in 1972, Father addresses the problem of unity. And he says, in their hearts, all people long for an ideal world, a world of oneness. However, at this point, it seems like an impossible dream. This can only be a source of sadness for humanity. If there is a God, he too undoubtedly is longing for such an ideal world, the world of oneness. If there is a God, he must bring about such a world without fail. And if you are a person who believes in God's ability, you will think that this task must be accomplished above all else. So, again, reflecting on our true Father, and many of us were able to sit in his audience, and he would sing, and he would make us, laugh, and he would make us cry, but his intention, above all, was to bring a spirit of unity. Unification Church, right? So, final words in that speech that he gave was, respecting this ideal, one's skin color is not an issue. In this matter, one's cultural background is not an issue. Our shared hope and purpose will be to love God and become one for the world that lives for the sake of God's will. When the world becomes one in this way, I believe that the ideal world desired by God and humankind will be realized. Therefore, the mission of the Unification Church is to teach the path for individuals to follow, the path for families, tribes, and peoples to follow, and the path for nations to follow will be realized, and that we are beginning the work to bring this about on earth. So this was in 1972. So Father is encouraging us, and he's explaining to us very clearly that it is our responsibility to bring the message of unity to ourselves, to our families, to the tribes, to the people that we're living in, because we're living in a very conflicted world. The subtitle to my sermon is The Divine Principle Course of Action, because I do believe, if anything, that I was inspired about when I first heard the Divine Principle was like, wow, there's a job to be done. We have to do something to help save the Messiah who's alive on the earth today. That was my experience. And we have to try to spread the word, try to speak the message of what the Divine Principle is all about. So, before I went there, okay, I wanted to say that if we think about, we just experienced in September, right? I think it was September, the 10th anniversary of our Father's passing into the spirit world. And if we go back 10 years, 2012, probably, you can all remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you heard, and I wasn't going to get emotional, that our true Father ascended. I remember clear as a bell, I was with my friend in the Westchester area, my good friend Gail Veith. She lives in Barbados now. Oh, and I heard Father ascended. I couldn't believe it, and maybe many of you had the same reaction. I couldn't wrap my head around it, as the expression goes, that Father had actually left the physical world. Some people, I guess, had the, understanding, thanks, Bob. Hope I don't have to use a lot of those. That Father, he's a human being and he's lived a long life, so he's going to pass away. But for me, I thought, no, Father's going to live. Sorry. That, even that 120 years, 100 years at least, and because Father talked about that sometimes. So we really, I had such, I guess, unrealistic expectations. And probably some of you have heard this testimony as well, that when they did the autopsy on Father, so hard to talk, that his lungs were black, right? And that was from the time in Hunan. So for all those years, Father had been carrying this kind of physical situation with him and pushing himself to such an extreme. Anyway, there's hope, right? So we know, like in 2012, even there was the predictions, the Mayan calendar said the end of the world is coming. 2012 was definitely a very, very significant time. But when True Father passed away, at least I felt like, wow, what's going to happen next? What do we do now? And of course we know that our true mother stepped up to the plate, but I'm sure even for her, of course, absolutely, what a transition that she had to make to prepare even for that awesome day that everyone was preparing for. What's the date? February 13th, right? The entrance into the Chanel-guk. And we remember those pictures of Mother just looking so forlorn, all by herself, standing in front of heaven and earth, proclaiming this amazing day, the entrance to the Chanel-guk. So from that time, though, in 2012, I reflect upon my own personal journey, and I really felt like, wow, is this the end? What's going to happen next? So I did start to do a lot of self-reflection, going to a lot of yoga classes, meditation. Mark and I took a Tai Chi class, introspective work. I did a lot of introspective work. I was, Han and I found this elder woman. She calls herself an ascended master. She's a Zoroastrian. She's from India, and she practiced meditation. And through her teaching, I was able to really tap into that world that Gene talked about in his sermon last week of the value of self-meditation and reflection, and the importance of that to really ground oneself. Because for me personally, for all of those years in our movement, I was chasing a dream that our True Father was talking about. But when he passed away, so all of a sudden it felt like there was no compass. And so I had to find my own compass. And I many times reflected on a passage in the Divine Principle, which I find to be very, very helpful. It's on page 159, and if you go to your EDP. But it explains the history of the providence of restoration in I. And I'm going to read it. As an individual, each one of us is a product of the history of the providence of restoration. Hence, the person who is to accomplish the purpose of history is none other than I myself. I must take up the cross of history and accept responsibility to fulfill its calling. To this end, I must fulfill in my lifetime horizontally, through my efforts, the indemnity conditions which have accumulated through the long course of the providence of restoration vertically. Only by doing this can I stand proudly as the fruit of history, the one whom God has eagerly sought throughout his providence. In other words, I must restore through indemnity during my generation all the unaccomplished missions of past prophets and saints who were called in their time to carry the cross of restoration. Otherwise, I cannot become the individual who completes the purpose of the providence of restoration. Sorry, one more page here. To become such an historical victor, I must understand clearly the heart of God. So I know Reverend Young might be some controversial for some people, but this is a message that he is constantly reflecting on. And he talks a lot, to the chagrin of many, the suffering heart of God. A lot of our members like, oh my gosh, I've suffered enough. You know, we don't want to hear about the suffering God. It's really bitter medicine to some people, and not easy for everyone to really take into consideration that this is what we are ultimately trying to do, is to liberate the suffering heart of our parent, Heavenly Father, Heavenly Parents. So I must understand clearly the heart of God when he worked with past prophets and saints, the original purpose for which God called them, and the details, the providential missions which he entrusted to them. Yet there is no one among fallen humanity who can become such an historical victor by his efforts alone. For this reason, we must understand all these things through Christ at the second advent. I bolded those letters. That's not deep, but those is significant. Who comes to fulfill the providence of restoration. Moreover, when we believe in him, become one with him, and attend him in his work, we can stand in a position of having fulfilled horizontally with him the vertical and deadly conditions in the history of the providence of restoration. The path which all past saints walked as they strove to fulfill God's providential will is the very path we must walk again today. Beyond that, we must continue on to the end of the path, even walking trails they have left untrodden. Therefore, fallen people can never find the path that leads to life without understanding the particulars of the providence of restoration. Herein lies the reason why we must study the principle of restoration in detail. That's significant. It's clearly saying, and this is something that I learned through my meditation practice, because I believe that the Judeo-Christian foundation that we stand on is ultimately, you know, we're always praying to the invisible God, our parent. We're always looking up to heaven for answers that would come from the invisible being God. However, through meditation, I understood that the answers are within me and within the world that I live in. We call the earth Mother Earth for a reason, because it is a source of life and of love and of goodness, that when we're constantly in the dreaming world of, you know, our Heavenly Parent answering my prayers, we exclude the very fact that the answers are right in front of me, within myself and within my environment, within my family, within my society. They're right there. I don't have to spend a lot of time in, experiencing the spirit world, in other words. So, gotta look to my notes here a little bit. So when True Mother did step up to the plate, significant time. I mean, like earth-shattering, right? In many ways. And it caused a lot of controversy, even with our own movement. People were like, what is she saying? You know, she's proclaiming she's the only begotten daughter of God. You know, who does she think she is? You know, I heard a lot of conversations like this going on in our movement. And I don't know. I think that for what, you know, it was very simple to me. Of course. She is the only begotten daughter of God. She is the first woman to ever experience a sinless life, and totally dedicating her life to attendance to our Heavenly Parent and to our true Father. I think, you know, we always saw Father on the stage working hard and Mother sitting on the sidelines, but I'm sure that internally she was working just as hard, and through her unity with our true Father. So, some words from our true Mother that I found in the 4 volumes that she recently published. I can't remember what the name of it's called. But she says, when True Father left for Danbury, I was devastated and distressed. This is in 1984. This is well before Father's passing into the spirit world. This is in 1984. Realizing that we would be parted for quite a while, there was only darkness before me and all energy was drained from my body. I could not help but say to him, I never dreamed that something like this could happen. Not even for a moment did I think that you would have to go to Danbury. And now that is actually what happened. And I don't know what to do. So from this passage, we can understand, at least it brings to mind, how much our true mother was absolutely united in heart and spirit with our true father. And that is where and why she has such determination to carry on the mission that she has today, to bring us substantially into the world era of Chanel-Gog. I had an enlightened conversation one time with a good friend of mine, Conrad Hauer, Josie's husband, Conrad. And Conrad is in Bridgeport. He is a tugboat captain. And so he spends 3 weeks on the sea, on the ocean, and 3 weeks at home. So 3 weeks at a time out on the sea gives him a lot of time for reflection and for meditation and for deeper thought. So one day, this was, I don't know, not too long ago, a couple of years maybe, I was having a conversation with him and we were talking about the Providence at this time going on. And somehow, I don't know who came to this conclusion when we were discussing, but about the creation and the fall and restoration. And what was inspiring to me was that the image that came to us was that as the Heavenly Parent began creation, of course he had his ideal in mind. And we all know very well the catastrophe, the trauma, the tragedy of the fall that we're still experiencing today. But Heavenly Father devised the principles of restoration that we talked about. But when you look at everything as one big picture, the masculine energy is is the initiator. You think about maybe building a house. That the masculine energy is typically, the construction, the construction guys and the architect I'm sure there are women out there who are architects and work in construction. I'm not diminishing anyone, but typically it is more of a masculine energy that is the initiator. And so, through the creative world, many times when you're creating a masterpiece or something wonderful, tragedies do happen. Like perhaps there is a terrible accident at the construction site, or there's something dramatically wrong with the electrical works or whatever. In other words, some catastrophe might happen in that original design, which we could refer to as the fall. But however, through the investment and the determination of the original creator, the designer, ultimately that beautiful building is finalized. And then, usually what happens is, when the finer details of putting the furniture in, deciding the colors of the paint, or the furniture, or the dishes, and this is the feminine touch. It's the final step. It's usually the completing step to make the original design complete. So in that sense, if we can compare that to the original design of Heavenly Parent, of the masculine force initiating, and then the catastrophe happening through the fall of man, and then, sending people, other architects and construction workers and electricians and whatever, to continue building this original design. And then ultimately the final touches is the feminine touch for the completion. So it seems that that was inspiring to me, because I thought, well, that's kind of where we're at right now. We're in these final stages when our true mother is standing at the forefront, and she is, even when she transcribed the original Chunseongyang, is that the big black book that originally, then she said, let's polish these gems and make them into beautiful gemstones, and she had editors work on those and polish those words of our true Father and put them into 3 different beautiful volumes. And then she's done, she's been doing many, many things which are kind of like the final touches, the final steps to the completion of what it means to be living in the era of Chanukuk. So with this, I wanted to also give a little personal testimony about when this actually happened, when Father was in Danbury. By the lottery system, my name was picked one time to become a state leader. It was in 1984, and probably you remember, this was the what I think Father called the emergency time period, when Hung Jin had passed away during this time. Well, it was even before that, because Father mobilized these every 21 days. There was members, we had to move in these IOWs kind of like teams. And so the leader in Boston became one of those leaders, and my name was picked because I had just graduated from the seminary to become the state leader in Boston. And I was like, what? I was a little on this CARP team out in Boulder, Colorado with Nate Winman. Some of you might know Nate. Oh, yeah. And so they get the word, you have to come to Boston and become the state leader. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do. But Nate helped me, and then I drove from Boston to, I drove from Boulder to Boston, and the house there in Boston, if you're familiar with that Boston Church Center, it's huge. It's a huge mansion there on the Boston Commons. And there was the Korean leader there, and so I went to go greet him. Here I am, the new state leader. And I was just overwhelmed with tears. I said, I can't do this. I'm not in any position to do this. And he just looked at me and said, you have to. So isn't that many times our case, okay, I can't do this, I have to do this, okay, I'm gonna do this. So, I found myself in that situation. So our regional leader, the Korean leader there, Reverend Lee, organized a prayer meeting at East Garden, at the Holy Ground there. There is a specific Holy Ground there at East Garden. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. So we went to the Holy Ground, and then, so it was in the night. We were going to pray at midnight, I think, a midnight prayer. So I was wearing, jeans and a sweatshirt or something, very casual, because it was, I don't know what time of year it was, but it was, chilly out, and then go outside and pray at midnight. And then we got word that Mother wanted to have breakfast with us the next morning. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm totally not prepared for this. And Mrs. Yu, Gilja Yu, was there. And I said, I don't have anything to wear, I'm not ready for this. And she said, you're a heavenly soldier, no problem. So we ended up having breakfast together that morning with True Mother. And the profound experience to me, which I can't even put into the correct explanation, but we gathered there on the breakfast table. I think there was there were the state leaders of New England, so it was New Hampshire, Vermont, Boston, we were all there on the table. And Mother says, I'm going to become tearful again. This is the last place I want to be, is having breakfast together with you this morning. Because Father was in Danbury. And, so we're sitting there like, But it wasn't, she didn't say it with any contempt or resentment or ill feeling. It was just a fact. This is the last place I want to be, is here having breakfast with you this morning. She said, but I'm learning from Father. So I want to practice what Father would do. That in the middle of difficulties, he would want to serve the members. So Mother, that's what she was doing. She was having breakfast together with these lame individuals, And so she had each one of us stand up and introduce ourselves, whatever. And New England, where we came from, it's tough. It's the cold environment and kind of cold. You know, they're good people. They're just not, they're just a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more, you know, and so the results is usually not super great up there in New England. So we didn't have any great results to share with Mother. But then she said, so then we had our breakfast, and then we were waiting, and then word came down, Mother wants to take everyone shopping. And so then I was, again, you know, in this kind of shabby outfit. And so she took us to, she took us to JCPenney's, and Mrs. Oni Durst was with her. And so Mother was with the brothers mostly, and they were all getting brand new suits. And so then Oni said to Mother, you know, dresses are a lot less expensive than suits. Let the sisters pick out 2 dresses. So then Mother said, okay. But before she said that, she came around. And I had picked out this one dress, which I can't fit in anymore. But anyway, picked out this one dress, and she grabbed it and she said, work hard. So, in other words, again, you know, this is not chasing dreams. This is not fairy tale stories. Mother's heart and effort as true fathers is that we put our energy into our lives and to the life that we have at this time in the physical world. So that always has stayed with me. And she let us pick out a pair of shoes too, and I looked at Mother's shoes and I thought, I want shoes just like her. So I found a similar pair, you know, that I wore actually down to the ground. You know, the heel is worn way down because I figured, okay, I worked hard in these shoes, so you know, I don't feel completely liberated from that, but that was an experience that testified that when we study the divine principle and reflect on what our time in this physical world is to strive for that unity in heart and to really work together in commitment. I guess that's what I would like to say today. Thank you. So please join me in prayer. Good morning, our precious Heavenly Parents. Really and truly, we are all so deeply grateful in the bottom of our hearts that we could come to know you, come to know our true parents, come to know and understand the divine principle. Because it really is a workbook, in a sense, detailing to us what is required of us at this time when we're here in the physical world. That we have a golden age in which we're living in, with especially our true Mother at the forefront, leading all of heaven and earth to help to build the era of Chanukuk. So we are so deeply grateful, and pray, Heavenly Parents, that we can become better people today than we were yesterday, and become better people tomorrow than we are today. We're grateful for this time as brothers and sisters, and share this as brothers and sisters here in the Triangle Community area, and in the name of the Nilsson family, Martin Nilsson and Ann Nilsson family, Achu.